cruise missiles from the Iranian coastline, drones from inland launchers, fast attack boats doing 50 knots from hidden coves, all at once. Inside a strait 21 nautical miles wide, where the Iranian shore sits 10 nautical miles from the shipping lane, and a sea-skimming missile launched from that shore reaches the ship in seconds, not minutes. That is what Iran threw at 2 American destroyers on May 4th, the opening day of Project Freedom, the first contested naval convoy through the Strait of Hormuz in nearly 4 decades. 0 American ships hit, 6 to 7 Iranian boats destroyed, every missile intercepted or jammed, every channel covered the result. None of them explained the engineering. Think about what the physics actually demands. 1 radar, 3 types of weapons. Every second that radar spends tracking a cruise missile overhead, it is blind to the 50-knot boat at sea level. The ship can guide 3 interceptors at once, and Iran did not send 3. The math says those 2 ships should not have survived, unless someone changed the math. Today on Navy Decoded, we show you exactly how 2 destroyers survived real swarm warfare inside the most dangerous choke point on Earth. Not the headline, the engineering. Subscribe, because after this video, you will never look at a naval battle the same way again. The 2 destroyers were USS Mason and USS Truxtun. Mason is a combat veteran, attacked 3 times by Houthi missiles in 1 week in 2016, deployed 263 days in the Red Sea in 2024, the longest combat deployment of any destroyer in that campaign. Truxtun had never fired a weapon in combat before May 4th. Both are Arleigh Burke-class Flight 2A destroyers. Both carry the same radar, Spy-1. To understand why the results seem impossible, you first need to understand why the Red Sea, as dangerous as it was, did not prepare anyone for this. In the Red Sea, the threat was one-dimensional. Houthi forces fired cruise missiles and drones. Both are air threats. Both travel through the same domain. An Aegis destroyer's Spy-1 radar handles air threats by scanning the sky, and when the sky is the only battlefield, the radar concentrates its energy in one direction. One job, one radar, manageable. Even then, it was close. In January 2024, a Houthi missile penetrated every layer of defense on an American destroyer and was shot down barely 1 nautical mile from the hull by the ship's last resort close-in weapon system, a rapid-fire gun called the Phalanx. That is roughly 6 seconds of flight time. 6 seconds between survival and a hit. And that was against a threat coming from a single domain. Now picture the Strait of Hormuz, 21 nautical miles at its narrowest point. The Iranian coastline sits 10 to 15 nautical miles from the shipping lane. A cruise missile launched from the Iranian shore, flying at wave height to avoid radar, does not appear on a ship's radar screen until roughly 8 to 12 nautical miles away. That gives the crew 20 to 40 seconds of warning. Not minutes, seconds. And the coast is not the only threat. Iran's IRGC Navy, not a proxy like the Houthis, but a professional military force with decades of training, maintains hundreds of fast attack boats hidden in small coves along the shoreline. These boats carry anti-ship missiles and reach speeds of 45 to 52 knots. They can launch and close to engagement range in minutes. Analysts estimate Iran has 800 to 1,000 anti-ship cruise missiles concealed in coastal bunkers and 5,000 to 6,000 naval mines ready for deployment. The Red Sea tested whether Aegis could handle air threats. Hormuz tested whether Aegis could handle air threats, surface threats, and coastal threats, arriving together at the same time in a corridor so narrow that the radar cannot see far enough to react slowly. The Red Sea taught Mason to box. Hormuz forced her to fight MMA. Mason arrived at Hormuz with more real combat experience than any active destroyer in the fleet. But the Red Sea only tested one system, air defense. Hormuz tested the system's ability to divide itself, to fight 3 wars with 1 radar at the same time. And that is where the physics changes. Start with the destroyer's brain, the Spy-1 radar. Spy-1 is a passive electronically scanned array, PESA. 4 fixed antenna faces, each covering 90 degrees, giving the ship 360-degree awareness. The radar manages its beam energy by time sharing, switching between searching for new targets, tracking confirmed ones, and guiding interceptor missiles thousands of times per second. It can track over 100 targets simultaneously. But tracking is not the bottleneck. Killing is. Here is the bottleneck. When Mason fires an SM-2, roughly $2 million per round, the ship must keep an illuminator locked on the target for the final seconds of the intercept. The illuminator is a focused radar beam that the missile rides to the target. No beam, no hit. And an Arleigh Burke carries only 3 illuminators. 3. That means no matter how many threats the radar tracks, 100, 200, only 3 can be killed simultaneously in those final seconds. There is a more expensive option. The SM-6 missile, roughly $4.3 million per round, more than double the SM-2, carries its own radar seeker. It does not need the ship's illuminator. It finds the target on its own. That frees up an illuminator slot for another missile. But every SM-6 fired is $4 million gone from a magazine that cannot be reloaded at sea. In the Red Sea, this system worked. The radar focused entirely on air search, one job. The illuminators handled threats as they arrived. The math held because the threats came from a single domain. In Hormuz, if the radar also had to track 50 fast boats on the surface, every second of beam time spent on a surface contact would be a second stolen from air defense. The update rate on each air target would drop. The engagement windows would shrink. Missiles could slip through. Project Freedom's answer was elegant. Do not ask the radar to track boats. Give the surface fight to someone else. Keep the radar on the sky, and only the sky. Run the bandwidth. Spy 1 manages 100 air tracks while guiding 3 missiles simultaneously. Add 50 surface contacts and the math breaks. The solution? Do not add them. If the radar is not watching the boats, who is? On May 4th, the answer came from above the water, but not from the ship's radar. It came from helicopters. H-64 Apache attack helicopters, U.S. Army assets deployed from regional bases in the Gulf, and MH-60R Seahawk maritime helicopters were sent over the strait during the transit. The Apaches are Army aircraft, not Navy. A destroyer does not carry them. They flew from land bases in the region, part of the 15,000-strong force CENTCOM assembled specifically for Project Freedom. Each helicopter carries its own sensors, forward-looking infrared cameras, targeting systems, fire control radar. None of these systems draw from the destroyer's Spy 1. The helicopter sees independently. It thinks independently. It kills independently. On May 4th, Iranian fast attack boats swarmed toward the convoy. Apaches met them with Hellfire missiles and 30mm cannon fire. Seahawks engaged with Hellfires and heavy machine guns. 6 to 7 boats were destroyed, confirmed by CENTCOM. Not by the destroyer's weapon systems, not by the radar, not by missiles from the vertical launch cells. By helicopters with their own eyes and their own weapons. This is the detail that changes the entire picture. Every fast boat destroyed by a helicopter was a target the Spy 1 never had to see. Every boat eliminated by an Apache freed beam time, radar energy that went back to tracking the cruise missiles and drones that actually threatened the ship. The helicopters did not just kill fast boats, they liberated the radar. This is not a new tactic. On April 18, 1988, during Operation Praying Mantis, the last time the United States Navy fought Iran in open combat, American Cobra attack helicopters destroyed Iranian fast attack boats in the same waters. 38 years later, same strait, same tactic. Different generation of weapons, same physics. Now address the third layer. Even with the radar holding the sky and the helicopters holding the water, there is still a problem. If Iran fires more cruise missiles than the ship can intercept simultaneously, more than 3 at once in the final phase, some will get through. The illuminator bottleneck is real. 3 illuminators, 3 missiles at a time. The answer is to reduce the number of missiles that need to be physically destroyed. This is where electronic warfare enters. The EA-18G Growler is a specialized electronic attack aircraft built on the FA-18F Super Hornet airframe. It carries jamming pods, HARM anti-radiation missiles that home in on enemy radar emitters, and AIM-120 air-to-air missiles for self-defense. A full-spectrum electronic warfare platform, not just a jammer. The Growlers supporting Project Freedom belong to VAQ-140, the Patriots, part of Carrier Air Wing 7 aboard USS George H.W. Bush, operating in the Arabian Sea. Here's how it works. Iran's anti-ship cruise missiles, variants like the Noor and the Qadr, use active radar homing in their terminal phase. The missile's seeker head sends out a radar signal, detects the reflection off the ship's hull, and steers toward it. A Growler broadcasts noise on the same frequency. The seeker receives jamming instead of a reflection. It loses the target. The missile flies into the ocean. No explosion, no interception. No interceptor missile spent. The threat simply misses. Every missile jammed by a Growler is one SM-2 or SM-6 that stays in the launcher, $2 to $4 million saved. Every missile jammed is one illuminator that does not need to engage, one illuminator freed for the next threat. Electronic warfare does not destroy missiles, it wastes them. And wasting an enemy's missiles costs you nothing but electricity. But there is a dependency that changes everything about this mechanism. The Growler is a fixed-wing aircraft. It requires a flight deck. A destroyer does not have one. The Growlers came from the carrier, USS George H.W. Bush. Without the Bush, there are no Growlers. Without Growlers, there is no soft kill layer. Without soft kill, every single incoming missile must be physically destroyed by an interceptor. The illuminator bottleneck goes from manageable to overwhelming. The destroyers also carry their own electronic countermeasures. The Nulka decoy, a rocket-propelled hovering decoy launched from the ship that creates a radar signature larger than the ship itself, luring missiles away. Mason used Nulka successfully against Houthi missiles in 2016. And the SLQ-32 shipboard electronic warfare system, a close-range jammer and threat detector that serves as the last electronic defense before the phalanx gun. Now combine all three mechanisms into the full picture. Project Freedom did not ask 2 destroyers to fight 3 wars. It split the war into 5 layers. Layer 1, the outermost ring. FA-18 Super Hornets from the Bush Carrier Air Wing and U.S. Air Force F-16 fighters from regional bases, Al Udeid in Qatar, Prince Sultan in Saudi Arabia, flew combat air patrol over the strait, intercepting Iranian drones before those drones reached the destroyer's radar range. They reduced the number of air targets the radar had to process. Layer 2. Growler electronic warfare aircraft jammed the seekers of incoming cruise missiles, reducing the number that needed physical interception. Layer 3. The Spy-1 radar tracked remaining air threats and guided SM-2 and SM-6 interceptors to destroy them. The radar did one job, only one. Layer 4. Apache and Seahawk helicopters patrolled the surface, destroying fast attack boats with their own sensors and weapons, keeping the radar completely free of surface contacts. Layer 5. The innermost ring. The Phalanx close-in weapon system, Nulka decoys, and the SLQ-32 shipboard jammer provided the final defense against anything that penetrated all 4 outer layers. 5 layers, each assigned to the platform best designed for that specific task. The destroyers held the center, everything else held the perimeter. That is not superior firepower. That is superior division of labor. On May 4th, the system worked. Not a single American vessel was struck. 6 to 7 Iranian fast boats were destroyed. Every cruise missile and drone was intercepted or jammed. Iran claimed, through state media, that a missile struck a U.S. warship near Jask Island. CENTCOM responded with a single word: fiction. By every tactical measure, Project Freedom was a success. Now count the cost. 15,000 service members, over 100 aircraft, a carrier strike group led by the USS George H.W. Bush with over 60 aircraft on its flight deck, Army Apache helicopters flown in from regional bases, Growler electronic warfare jets from the carrier's air wing, Air Force F-16s from bases in Qatar and Saudi Arabia, Navy FA-18s from the carrier. All of this for 2 destroyers escorting a handful of commercial ships across 21 nautical miles of water. Every SM-2 fired cost roughly $2 million. Every SM-6 cost roughly $4 million. Every Hellfire from an Apache cost $100,000 to $150,000. The 5-layer zone defense that made the transit possible required a carrier air wing, land-based fighter squadrons, helicopter detachments, and the entire CENTCOM electronic warfare architecture operating simultaneously. That is the perfect solution, and it is the solution that cannot scale. Most of the time, those 15,000 people are not there. In the South China Sea, the Taiwan Strait, the Bab el-Mandeb, destroyers patrol alone. 1 radar, 3 illuminators, no Growlers, no Apaches, no 5 layers. The same multi-domain threat, compressed onto a single hull. The Red Sea made everyone believe Aegis could handle it alone, but the Red Sea only tested 1 domain, Hormuz tested 3, and the answer required an entire strike group. There is a technology solution on the horizon, but it does not arrive the way most people imagine. The SPY-6 radar, an active electronically scanned array with 30 times the sensitivity of the SPY-1, can generate multiple independent beams simultaneously. Air tracks and surface tracks handled at the same time without the time-sharing compromise that limits SPY-1. It is the radar that solves the bandwidth problem. But installing it across the fleet is not a software update. It is structural surgery. Replacing a ship's radar means cutting open the superstructure, swapping the cooling systems that handle the radar's massive power draw, running miles of new cabling, and adding ballast to rebalance the ship's center of gravity. American dry docks can process roughly 2 to 3 ships per year at that level of modification. The Navy operates more than 60 Burt-class destroyers. Run that math. And not every ship qualifies. The Navy's upgrade program, DDG Mod 2.0, only targets Flight 2A hulls with enough remaining service life to justify the investment. Older destroyers, Flight 1, Flight 2, and the entire Ticonderoga cruiser fleet will be decommissioned in the 2030s. Their hulls are too worn to cut open. They retire with SPY-1 still bolted on. The full transition is projected to complete in the late 2030s or early 2040s. The timeline is not set by how fast Raytheon can build radar arrays. It is set by how fast American dry docks can cut steel, 2 to 3 hulls at a time. Mason and Truxtun are both Flight 2A. They carry SPY-1 today. The fleet that actually sails into choke points like Hormuz will live with this bandwidth limitation for years to come, solving it the way Project Freedom did, with 15,000 people, or not solving it at all. Until those upgrades arrive, the choice is clear. Either provide the full zone defense, carrier, growlers, helicopters, fighters, or accept that a destroyer alone in a multi-domain environment is operating on the edge of its physics. That is the reality behind the headline. If you now see the Strait of Hormuz differently than you did 15 minutes ago, subscribe to Navy Decoded. We do not cover battles. We decode the physics behind the radar. One thing the physics cannot explain. Every equation in this video assumed the crew executes perfectly. Under fire, in real time, inside a 21-mile corridor with missiles arriving in seconds. Mason's crew did. Truxtun's crew did. The math made survival possible. The sailors made it real. The question is not whether Aegis can survive a multi-domain swarm attack. May 4th answered that. It can. The question is whether it can survive one alone. Remove any layer, the Growlers, the Apaches, the fighters, and the bandwidth breaks. 3 illuminators against a barrage. 1 radar dividing itself between sky and surface. The math stops working. Most of the time, those 15,000 people are not there. So the next time a destroyer sails into a choke point alone, no carrier, no growlers, no Apaches, ask yourself, who is holding the other 4 layers?